Good day, Dragon Slayers. Once again, I'm joined by my partner, Jessica Ferrin. Jessica, you had a lovely vacation, I trust, in San Francisco.
hmm I did. We were in Carmel. We drove through the Bay Area, and then I ended up in Carmel for the weekend, and it was wonderful.
Well, I hope it was as lovely as it was expensive.
It was worth the price, but thankfully I was hosted by a gracious bride for a bachelorette party, which was just unbelievable. I feel very privileged that I was invited to that.
So, for those of you out there, uh, Jessica and I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago, which really intersected both of our interests in spirituality and the subject of neurotheology. So, I guess my first contention that I would like to advise people of is the notion, actually, Tony Robbins talks about this, about the distinction between push motivation and pull motivation. Push motivation requires effort. Pull motivation reflects the inspiration that we get if we have a compelling target. And it's the pull motivation that I want to talk about today because that's the kind of motivation that gets us beyond our petty addictions that interfere with the direction that we are destined to go. Uh, my own hypothesis is that if you read carefully through various kinds of scriptures or religious writing, you find that the prophets, the oracles, saints, if you will, uh, were all people that seem to have this special connection with deities. And I think, as I shared earlier, that you cannot read something like the 23rd Psalm without believing that David had this unique connection with his God. You can also visualize him walking through the valley of the shadow of death, and God is by his side. So that's unusual, uncanny experience that I wish to tap into. I've noted that, by the way, the most powerful study on depression involved a Johns Hopkins study years ago that was that took depressed people, put them through a transformative experience, but that experience was facilitated by psilocybin, a psycholytic. And it's for this reason that I think many of us, myself included, are now using agents such as ketamine to actually help people transform. My comment about that is that using ketamine alone probably doesn't do the trick. You're going to have to determine what your target is in that. And most of us go through life following the principles of ready, fire, aim. And we need to develop our target first, that compelling target that motivates us and proceed down that divine path. Well, you commented to me earlier when we were off air about uh, a book that you've been reading and a quotation.
hmm So there's this book that I found when I was reading another book by a famous social psychologist, Jonathan Haidt, which I believe I spoke about in our last podcast. And through his references and some of the work he did and alluded to in that book, I found this book called Awe, The New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life by Decker Keltner. And his book is essentially a whole conversation Dr. Tom and I have had offline about we believe that humans evolved to connect with divinity, however you choose to phrase that, gods, spirits, the one God. We're all neurologically and biologically capable of having those experiences. And he did some behavioral research, and his definition of awe is the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your current understanding of the world. And he did work with people all across the world in a variety of religions and in secular places. So places that you would not define as religion, but still experience awe. Not defined as religious, but they still experience awe the same way that the rest of us do. It might look a little different and they might have different flavors to it. But I found it very interesting that I would consider him the expert on awe. He would be one of the foremost experts in the world on the emotion and the feeling and all of the feelings around it. That's his area of expertise, and he's doing clinical behavioral research on it. And he includes in there feelings that you get from psilocybin and other, we'll call them drugs, ayahuasca, peyote. He includes all of those, and he actually has a section that discusses the gratitude and the knowledge that we've gotten from ancient peoples and indigenous peoples that still practice it today, and what we can learn from those drugs. Now, I personally grew up as one of those kids who did everything they were told. I did not do drugs. I did not drink, until I went to a party college on accident. None of those things were part of my experience. So I came from a very biased perspective of drugs are bad for you and they alter your brain chemistry. And now I have a fiance who loves mushrooms and thinks that um, better living through chemistry doesn't have to be from a pharmaceutical chemistry. It can also come from something that is more natural. And don't worry, he's not crazy. He's not always high. But he did open my mind that you can be an intelligent, respectful, normal adult and still find experiences. And I'm going to try to read a quote. It's a whole chapter, so I'm going to try to help with a little context that I've just laid out. But what he is essentially saying is, with these plant medicines given to us by indigenous cultures, thanks to their thousands of years of composting the mystical awe we found in these molecules, we do indeed redeem something really wild in the universe, something very close to our highest happiness, from something like psilocybin or ayahuasca. And now I think that we know different chemical compounds, but I think it's the same category. I would not, LSD is in that category. I would not list off all of them. I'm not as familiar with this, but I do think we have the potential with different biology to tap into that faster. And I use an app on my phone called binaural beats, and it essentially has different frequencies in each ear. And it's not the same method, but it does help me drop into a deeper state of meditation faster. So if someone struggles with having time or they feel that it's not for them, I would say maybe you just haven't found a way to facilitate having those experiences yet. I found mine. Thankfully, it does not involve drugs, so I can do it in the middle of my workday if I have to. But I think that they're all related to the same neurochemical experience we have. We're all related biologically to a deeper vastness in the universe.
Well, you're actually touching on things that have been talked about literally since before you were born. Uh,
Since before most of the people we know are born, actually, thousands of years.
uh, right. And various people have touched on this
Hmm.
in contemporary times. Uh, Investigators like Charlie Tart writes about peak experiences, hits this issue. Uh, Aldous Huxley talked about this in terms of the doors of perception. So we have a lot of people that have explored these areas, and many have had these transformative experiences that have been life changing. And I think it's possible to actually live it, not necessarily. You might use drugs. Drugs can be an accelerant. Uh, Meditation. In fact, we've looked at studies that demonstrate that meditators actually have a thicker cortex and a more vascularized hippocampus, that area of the brain responsible for immediate memory.
And a smaller amygdala.
Right.
Hmm.
The other part of that is if you look at elite athletes, in fact, there were studies done on Tom Brady when he was in his prime, and somehow they did these studies of him when he was on that, I think, immediately after a successful drive when he won the game in the last 2 minutes, much to the chagrin of much of the world. But these, these Tom Brady and the Patriot fans and the Tampa Bay Buccaneer fans had some delight in that. But he had a huge surge of testosterone during this time, but not cortisol. So it was empowered by this. It was a great flow. Uh, in my own athletic days as a distance runner, kind of finishing a marathon when I fell into my kick at the end of a race. That was a transformative experience. So many of us experience that flow,
Runner's high.
and now yeah, we need to channel it in direction of our spiritual centering. Uh, you had mentioned earlier, and something that we did not spend sufficient time on. You spent a lot of time. This was an undergraduate honors thesis, wasn't it? On
This particular topic wasn't, but I do have a minor in theology and a minor in history because accounting, believe it or not, is not my passion in life, but I wanted to get a real job. So I would say that most of my free time is spent either reading about dragons and fairies or religion. And I love the idea of Joseph Campbell's idea that all religions have so many aspects that relate to each other and to this essential truth in life. All stories have, how would I paraphrase some of his work? We have a great flood story in almost all religions. We have stories of water. Water is sacred in almost all religions, as it should be. It's essential for life. We have great mothers. We have the wise old man. We have the arc of the hero. All of these things are in common throughout the world. And I love finding the parts that I agree with and how many religions they touch on. And Dr. Tom and I have talked extensively that true religion, we exclude things that are cult or maybe zealous fanaticism. True religion all espouses this feeling of compassionate love and understanding. And I think that it is one of the hardest values to cultivate is to be compassionate when something hard is going on. And I think that that is an aspect of what I studied and what drew me to this topic. But I think what drew me to it the most was I don't feel faith the same way that my best friend, who's very Christian, does. She wakes up and she is so excited to go to church on Sunday. And when she had children, she's so excited to sing songs with them. She doesn't put them in Sunday school unless they want to go see friends and learn the stories. She wants them with her, experiencing this sense of joy and this sense of faith with her. And I've never felt that. I've never wanted to wake up on a Sunday and go anywhere. But I was having a discussion last night with my partner, and he um, somehow we brought up the topic of values and goals. And what are your goals in life and how do you achieve them? And I think that it's exactly the topic that Dr. Tom is trying to pull out of this. I stretch every night before bed. I do a little bit of yoga. When I was injured, I lost sight of it. I couldn't do it, and I had a big identity crisis. And I didn't realize that that's what it was until I could do yoga again.
so what you're referring to, a concept that I want to hold on to, is authenticity.
Authenticity.
Yeah, the authentic Jessica does yoga.
Yes,
She meditates. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the authentic Jessica does yoga and meditates. And when I lose sight of that, I feel less peaceful and I feel less confident and less happy with myself. And he was saying, I have mobility goals. And I said, well, yeah, you achieve them. You do jujitsu 5 days a week. You're working on them. And he said, well, no, you stretch every night before bed. And it reminded me of a conversation I had with a friend of mine who spent 10 years in an ashram in India. And she studied the yogic practice. And I don't mean yoga like you go to hot yoga and you stretch for a while. I mean the religion where yoga originated, which is also called yoga, which can get confusing, which is what we ran into last night.
Okay, again, the way of life. Yeah.
The way, the way of life. And I think the push pull meditation or motivation for things like meditating or prayer, going to church, or regularly doing ayahuasca, whatever your pathway to that essential self is, you have to decide, am I at the point in my motivation where I need an external motivator to get there? Or have I decided that's part of my identity and I'm going to let myself do it whenever it comes up? And I think that from yoga, I went to yoga, hot yoga, a very corporate yoga studio. All the teachers had the same method. There was no Krishna at the door. There were no Buddhas. This was a very American corporate yoga, and I loved it. And I went all the time. And it made me want to do yoga at home. And I saw girls in that class that could do handstands in their 50s, and they were so inspirational to me, and it made me think I'm going to do yoga and I'm going to be a yogi like them. And through that, with my theology understanding, I also picked up, well, what is real yoga? And I went through it, and I had taken a class on Hinduism in college, so I understood that, I related to Hinduism stronger than most people do when they take the class in college. That I related, and it helped me understand Christianity and my friend's faith better, and it clicked for me. But the part where I didn't realize I had internalized it and it became a pull motivation is I said I want my identity to be a yogi. I want to do what people who are yogis do. I want to be careful with my consumption of food. I stopped eating pizza before I went to yoga because it's really hard to do yoga when you're eating deep fried food right before you go. And I committed to stretching every night because yoga once a week is not the same as doing 5 minutes for yourself to sleep better. So I got the pull motivation, but only after I had allowed to push myself into those positions and into that schedule.
What is wonderful about this, you touched on many different things,
Hmm.
but so you have incorporated as central to your identity these various aspects of your life. And you're on the heroic path
Yes,
because
I think so.
the path is a discipline. Yeah, well, it's pretty obvious. Yeah, you radiate with it.
It has taken me away from a lot of very negative suicidal ideations and depressive spins. When I'm feeling really depressive and hard on myself, I remember it's okay, I didn't get invited to so and so's birthday because I did yoga.
Oh, you too. I wasn't invited either.
Yeah, and when my feelings get hurt, but I spent that time doing something that was meaningful to me, I think, oh, I wasn't excluded from that experience. I was better aligned with this one instead. And it's when you have that identity with whatever your goals are and you stick to them and you don't allow yourself to get distracted by other things, which happens. You have to let the thoughts come up and then say, that's okay, I'm on a different path. That's what worked for me. And I know that other people will find different heroic paths, but for me, deciding I'm okay with being a yogi, that's an identity I can adhere to, that worked for me. But I have a question for you, Dr. Tom, on this from another book I'm reading, that I'm reading slowly because it has a lot of meditative passages in it. I'm reading Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet because I am a raging hippie, by Thich Nhat Hanh, and it is fascinating. But there's a section in here where I'll read just a brief quote. The monk Ananda once asked the Buddha, is it true that having good spiritual friends is about half the spiritual path? And the response was, no, Ananda, having good spiritual friends isn't half the path, it's the whole path. And so, something Dr. Tom and I have spoken about previously, do you need a community to help adhere to your values, or can you do this heroic transformation on your own? What do you think, Doc?
Well, if you had a community that ideally fit you, it would be a turnkey. But I would submit, well, even if we just kind of explored our own connection, if you are vigilant about the world and you are aware of what your target is in life, you will ultimately make it a point to cultivate your own community. As you know, we facilitate each other. Like, you're going to find souls along the way that it's almost like it transcends life. It's almost like we've been here before. It's that whole spiritual, deep spiritual connection that says, okay, I know you, and I know that you're a good person, and I feel safe with you, and I want to gather people like that. So yes, the community facilitates it. In addition, beside the community, we have activities, rituals that reward our path. Uh, when you have a chance, God willing that his podcast is not off in the universe someplace, and listen to Michael. So Michael's story, my cousin's story, is that an incredibly successful guy. I really hardly knew him. He was like 13 years old when I left Detroit, and thanks to my son Seth and all his effort in catalyzing a family reunion trip that he and I did about 3 years ago,
That's great.
got a chance to meet a number of my cousins, relatives, and Michael in particular. And I discovered this guy who morphed from being an incredibly successful attorney, community activist, into a really wise and very accessible biblical scholar. Uh, and as he looks at it, he very much follows the path of the Old Testament. That is his life, and he's passionate about it, and that's his particular path, and that's how he anchors himself. He prays every day. He conscientiously observes the religious holidays and the Sabbath, and that's the ritual that reminds him and facilitates his destiny. Each of us, if we're fortunate to have a religious anchor that allows us to feel positive about ourselves and about our world and about our earth, the gift that it is, we're probably on the right path. I think we have to determine that the healthy path that should minimize as much as possible the hostility that we might feel toward our fellow man, unless it is an issue of evil. I think one of the things that we need to be aware of is that there are all these distractors from our consciousness, which may well be chaos or evil. We have to be vigilant about that. But if we adhere to our path and we adhere to our community, the community will reinforce that. So it's far easier if we have that community. But the community may not necessarily be a congregation. It may not even be family, but it can be an assemblage of like-minded souls.
My current community, and this is a bit of a stretch, it just fell into place a little bit, is my partner, my dad, and I go to the sauna at the gym that Dr. Tom and we're all a members of. And it just so happened that there are a few people who also go sit in the sauna. And one day when we were sitting in there, our friend Bob, who we were convinced was a sauna spirit and just appeared in the sauna, and we never saw him outside of it. He was in there before us.
So Bob the Meditator, the gray-haired Bob,
Bob the Meditator, yes.
yeah, Bob the Meditator, okay.
We were sitting in there one time in silence, and it was just him and I that day. Absolutely no words were spoken, but I was holding my hands like this. And he said, "Do you know what that is?" And I said, "Well, I'm meditating. And he saw that as a signal that I was on a similar path to him with meditation and understanding the world in the metaphysical way that he does. And from there, every time we saw him, we had a new topic to talk about because it happened to be our flavor of religion and spirituality. And every day we try to go to the sauna, I would say once a week or twice a week at a minimum. Bob's in there every day. Bob's in there every day for, I want to say, an hour and a half, this is a hot cedar sauna, dry sauna. It has a lot of benefits for your heart, cholesterol. It's a great space for health reasons that other podcasts will cover, and other people have done much research to prove. So I've been trying to do it for my health. I try to go for those reasons. And when my back was injured and I couldn't work out, it was one of the only ways that I could get a sweat going and I could feel like I was detoxing. And I found that we would go regularly, and there would be sometimes Dr. Tom, my dad, my fiance, and Bob, and a few other members that Bob had become friends with. And we would talk about sauna things that were related to that. And it became a good sense of community, a good social experience. I went through a very isolating experience a few years ago where I lost a number of friends and people that I was close with. And I had the sauna. And it didn't matter if other people outside the sauna cared about what I was going through or not, because in the sauna, we talked about meditating and patience and what it's like to relate to the universe that way. And you have to talk to get yourself through an hour long sauna session when you can't keep up with Bob the sauna spirit. And it drew me through it. I went from having a 20-minute threshold to being in there for an hour and 15 talking to Bob until I was like, Bob, I gotta go. We have to continue this another time. This is my limit. But my limits got better and better because I found a sense of community, ironically, in the sauna.
So I'm curious, just in terms of your own health, how much water do you drink when you're in that sauna?
At least, oh gosh, I have a water bottle that a friend got me that holds an entire bottle of wine. They bought it at a winery. It's a double vacuum seal bottle, and I try to drink at least one regular sized water bottle when I'm in there, if not my whole wine bottle worth of water.
All right, so today, with your inspiration, we have learned the following. One, don't eat pizza, particularly pepperoni pizza, before you.
No pizza before hot yoga. No, do not recommend.
Okay, okay. As much as possible, exercise and meditation is part of your authentic self. You have a pull target, a spiritual target, but you also touched on something which I think we need to highlight. You were able to connect with Hindu
Yes.
paths,
Hmm.
despite the fact that you didn't grow up as a Hindi.
No, I grew up Episcopalian, and the other religion that I was brought into was my uncle is Jewish. None of those are even close to being Hindi.
But that was important because I think we need to understand that although we may feel a sense of familiarity and comfort with our own particular religious upbringing, others may similarly be familiar with their own unique upbringing. So there needs to be some tolerance for that.
I think that the best example that I came up with when I was understanding Hinduism, and at the time I was rejecting Christianity, I never understood how you could have one God and Jesus. They were, in my brain, that was a hypocritical contradiction. And it wasn't until I understood through an explanation of Hinduism that if there is one divinity, one sense of God, however you want to phrase it, but they come out in different avatars or different iterations for different people, it doesn't mean that there's now multiple gods in Christianity. It means that there are different aspects that the human brain can comprehend. And that helped me unlock a deeper understanding of the religion I was raised in, but that I no longer felt a call to. And I think that by studying other religions, it can give you different perspectives on your own religion, but it might help reframe something for you about a different religion that you had once thought was crazy or that you thought was not a real religion. And I know that in this country, we have a lot of Islamophobia. With 9/11, there was a big rejection of Middle Eastern religions. I would say that Islam has more in common with Christianity and with Judaism than it does any other religion in the world. And I think that here in the US, we don't see it that way. But after reading some of it, it's the same message. And people who are true Christians and people who are true Muslims are on the same path. They're just maybe walking it under the trees or under the sunlight. It's the same, but different.
I would think that, and I'd welcome, in fact, I'm hoping to have a contribution from one of my Islamic friends to this dialogue, but uh, I would think that the face of Islam as represented by Hamas or an angry jihadist might be the equivalent of the face of Catholicism in the Spanish Inquisition. Uh, that there are manifestations of religion which may be such a perversion that they're not the true path.
Hmm.
That troubles me. I mean, if you look at the classical distortion is Jonestown, where
Yep.
people followed Jones, drank the Kool-Aid and died. that particular Kool-Aid may not be healthy for you because it has red dye in it or whatever was in it.
I don't think it was just red dye.
You think not? Okay.
I don't think so. I don't think that they have that version of Kool-Aid in the grocery stores.
Okay. Well, you have once again been magnificent,
Thank you.
and I'm hoping that we will continue this dialogue very soon, ideally next week if we can swing it. And we'll continue our explorations on the issues of the synchronicity between our neurological legacy and our spiritual quest. For all of you out there, thank you for watching us. We welcome any contributions, and if you look on our website, you may have an opportunity to make contributions. Uh, not necessarily financial. I'm talking about your ideas,
Thoughts.
thoughts, and so I hope that this has at least helped facilitate your own heroic paths. Be well to all. Good day.